Beyoncé's reputation is shaking to its core, and the man behind it all might just be Jason Lee. Once dismissed as a clout-chasing blogger, Jason may have been holding on to explosive secrets about Beyoncé and Jay-Z this entire time. And now, with divorce rumors swirling and ties to Diddy's downfall resurfacing, fans are connecting the dots. And it's not looking good for the Carters. Let's rewind, because this story didn't start overnight. It all started with whispers. Subtle, easily overlooked comments from Hollywood Unlocked's Jason Lee, hinting that Beyoncé and Jay-Z's relationship wasn't what it seemed. While the world saw the perfect power couple, polished, private, and unshakable, Jason was out here dropping lines that hit differently in hindsight. He said, "They together, but they living separate." At the time, it sounded like messy talk. But looking back now, it feels like a breadcrumb trail that led straight to the chaos we're watching unfold today. And if that sounds wild, just wait, because Jason didn't stop there. Jason started popping up on talk shows, podcasts, and live streams, teasing that he had receipts proof of something big that the public didn't know about the Carters. He didn't name names, but the way he talked, everyone could tell who he was referring to. He hinted that there was more to Jay-Z's loyalty than meets the eye, and that Beyoncé's silence wasn't just elegance, it was strategy. Fans laughed it off at first. "Nobody can touch Beyoncé," they said. "She's untouchable." But Jason wasn't laughing. He was setting the stage for a scandal that could shake the industry's most powerful couple. Because in Jason's world, silence means suspense. And he was building it perfectly. The internet has a short memory, but Jason doesn't. Months before rumors of a separation began, he was already planting seeds. He dropped cryptic comments about being left out of the circle and hinted that certain people were afraid of their public image crumbling. It wasn't until much later that fans began to connect the dots. Jason wasn't just gossiping, he was warning us. He knew something, and for once, he didn't seem to be bluffing. And that's when things started to get personal, because Beyoncé made a move that would set Jason off like never before. The turning point was about to arrive, a single decision from Beyoncé that would light the fuse for everything that followed. Jason's loyalty, his pride, and his ego were all on the line. And when you push a media personality like him into the shadows, he doesn't disappear. He plots his comeback. And that comeback began the moment Beyoncé left him off the list. For Jason Lee, it all came down to one invitation, or rather the lack of one. After years of praising Beyoncé publicly, defending her online, and even calling her a cultural icon, he thought he was part of her inner circle. He bragged about supporting the Renaissance era like no one else, spending over $40,000 on concert tickets, travel, and exclusive merch for his entire team. That's not just fandom, that's loyalty. And Jason expected that loyalty to be rewarded. But what happens when the Queen doesn't even acknowledge your loyalty? When Beyoncé hosted her glittering Renaissance movie premiere in London, she flew out the biggest influencers, celebs, and A-listers in the industry. Everyone from high-fashion TikTokers to lifestyle vloggers had their invites in hand, sipping champagne, posing on the silver carpet, living their best lives. And right in the middle of all that luxury and hype, one seat stayed empty. Jason Lee's. No invite, no email, not even a "thanks for your support." He wasn't just snubbed, he was erased. And if there's one thing Jason Lee doesn't handle well, it's being erased. The moment he realized he'd been left out, Jason went nuclear. He fired up his camera, jumped on his talk show, and blasted Beyoncé for what he called a slap in the face to black media. His voice cracked with anger, his tone raw and unfiltered, accusing her team of playing favorites, of catering to the same influencers who'd never done half the cultural work he had. It wasn't just a rant, it was a declaration of war. But deep down, this wasn't just about a movie invite, it was about pride. Jason felt humiliated. He thought he'd earned his spot in Beyoncé's orbit, that after years of covering her rise, she owed him some recognition. And in his mind, being left off that list wasn't an oversight. It was a message. A reminder that no matter how much you praise her, Beyoncé's circle is made of steel, and you don't get in without her permission. And that's when something inside Jason shifted. The superfan became the saboteur. After that night, everything he said about Beyoncé carried a new tone, sharper, colder, more calculated. The jokes had an edge. The comments had bite. It was no longer admiration. It was revenge disguised as commentary. And as his anger simmered, he began hinting that he had something big, something that could make the whole world question what they thought they knew about Beyoncé and Jay-Z. And that's when the real bombshell dropped. Jason wasn't just mad. He was loaded. The snub didn't just bruise Jason Lee's ego, it ignited something in him. After being left out of Beyoncé's London premiere, he went from disappointed to dangerous. On his show, Jason started dropping cryptic lines. Little warning shots that didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. He spoke like a man holding a loaded gun made of gossip, and each episode, his finger got a little closer to the trigger. And then, one night, he finally pulled it. Live on air, Jason made a claim that turned every head in the room. He told his co-host that he had receipts, real, physical proof, about Beyoncé and Jay-Z's private life. The studio went silent. The guests froze. Their faces said everything. Jason leaned in and said something along the lines of, "I've done a lot for that team, but I'm not going to say what. Because if I did, Beyoncé's good internet would explode." It wasn't just shade, it was a warning. But the real shock came next, because Jason decided to make it personal. He then threw out an ultimatum on live TV. If Beyoncé didn't pull some strings to get Kelly Rowland, yes, Kelly Rowland, to appear on his show, he'd start talking. He wasn't subtle, he practically said it plain as day. "If I don't get Kelly, it's gonna be a problem. Then I'm putting out receipts." The internet couldn't believe what it was hearing. Fans flooded Twitter, calling him unhinged, delusional, and desperate for attention. But Jason didn't back down. He smirked through the backlash like a man who knew something the rest of us didn't. And that's when things started to feel less like gossip and more like blackmail. Because think about it, Jason wasn't just talking smack anymore. He was trying to bargain with Beyoncé on her own turf. Telling the most private woman in the industry that he had leverage, that was either career suicide or the most fearless move of his life. And while fans laughed, the timing of it all was chillingly precise. Just as whispers of Beyoncé and Jay-Z's separation started creeping into the headlines. Which begs the question, did Jason know something the world didn't? People started replaying his interviews, dissecting every word, every smirk, every sly pause. Had he been hinting about the Carter's downfall this entire time? Or was he bluffing, hoping the chaos would earn him relevance again? Either way, Jason Lee had just crossed an invisible line. And once you come for Beyoncé, there's no coming back. And the moment he went public with those threats, the entire industry started paying attention. The tension was electric. Beyoncé stayed silent, as she always does. But that silence only made the drama louder. Jason had poked the hive, and now everyone was waiting to see if the queen bee would sting back. And that's when the story takes a sharp turn, because suddenly this drama wasn't just about Beyoncé. It was about Jay-Z and his connection to Diddy. The moment Jason Lee's threats hit the internet, the conversation shifted fast, from petty drama to potential danger. Because this wasn't just about Beyoncé anymore, Jason's timing lined up too perfectly with something far bigger, the crumbling empire of Sean Diddy Combs. Suddenly, fans realized Jason's words weren't random. They were strategic. He dropped them right as Diddy's name was being dragged through every headline in the country. And that's when people started connecting the dots. See, Jay-Z and Diddy weren't just friends, they were brothers in business. Their relationship went back decades, long before Beyoncé entered the picture. They collaborated on music, investments, brand deals, even parties. So when the Cassie lawsuit detonated and Diddy's reputation started burning down, it was only a matter of time before people started asking, where was Jay-Z in all of this? Insiders whispered that Beyoncé was blindsided, that Jay's behind-the-scenes dealings with Diddy were a lot murkier than she ever knew. And if that's true, Beyoncé wasn't just protecting her image, she was protecting herself. The friendship between Jay and Diddy had always looked unbreakable. Diddy even bragged once that there were only two people alive who could call him Sean, his mother and Jay-Z. It sounded like brotherhood. It looked like loyalty. But now, that quote reads like a red flag waving in 4K. Because at the same time he was saying those words, lawyers were already preparing Cassie's bombshell lawsuit, and Jay-Z, the businessman who always stays 10 steps ahead, had to know something was coming. And if he did, that means Beyoncé was walking straight into a storm. She didn't even see. Cassie's legal team claimed Diddy had spent years trying to buy her silence, offering millions to bury her story. And if Diddy was desperate enough to do that, imagine what secrets he might have been protecting, or who else those secrets could implicate. Rumors started swirling that Jay-Z wasn't just a bystander. He might have been tied up in the same networks, the same private deals, the same high-profile chaos that was now coming to light. And when Diddy started falling, people began to wonder, who was he going to take down with him? That's when the whispers about Jay turned darker. Industry insiders said he'd been quietly distancing himself, moving money, shifting partnerships, preparing for impact. Beyoncé, on the other hand, was reportedly furious, not because of the business, but because of the betrayal. She had built an empire based on control and image, and now the man beside her might have been gambling it all in someone else's scandal. And just when fans thought it couldn't get any uglier, the whistleblowers arrived. Because into this mess walked Jaguar Wright, and she wasn't just ready to spill tea, she was ready to pour gasoline. And what she said next made Jason's threats look like child's play. If Jason Lee was tossing sparks into the air, Jaguar Wright came in with a blowtorch. While the internet was still debating whether Jason was bluffing, Jaguar stepped forward and said what no one else dared to. Jay-Z, she claimed, wasn't just tied to Diddy, he was cut from the same cloth. She didn't mince words. She said Jay wasn't quiet out of loyalty. He was quiet out of fear. Fear of what Diddy could expose if the walls came crashing down. And that's when this went from rumor to revelation. Jaguar painted a chilling picture of the industry's so-called brotherhood. According to her, men like Jay and Diddy weren't just partners, they were part of a mutual protection ring. Each one knew too much about the other, too many late-night secrets, too many skeletons locked in penthouse closets. She claimed that if one fell, the other would fall too. And that's why Jay's been staying silent through Diddy's downfall. Because in Jaguar's words, if Diddy opens that vault, Jay's name is written all over it. And what she said next? It shook fans to the core. Jaguar claimed Jay had a long history of manipulating and mistreating women, both publicly and privately. She said Beyoncé wasn't the first, and maybe not even the worst, to suffer under his control. Jaguar started naming names. Foxy Brown, Aaliyah, Tyra Mari, and even Rihanna were mentioned in whispers that had haunted hip-hop circles for years. She said these weren't isolated stories, they were a pattern, a trail of power dynamics and exploitation that the industry ignored because it was Jay-Z. And that was just the beginning of the fallout. Because once Jaguar dropped those claims, fans began to notice a disturbing pattern in the timeline. Each woman she mentioned was young, talented, and vulnerable. And Jay, already a superstar, was the man promising fame. It mirrored Diddy's situation with Cassie, a powerful man offering opportunity but at a devastating emotional cost. People started asking if Jay and Diddy were reflections of each other, two kings with the same dark crown. But Jaguar didn't stop at the women. She went after the empire itself. She said Jay-Z wasn't just protecting his image, he was protecting the machine. The partnerships, the brands, the billion-dollar deals that would crumble if people ever saw the man behind the curtain. And she accused him of keeping Beyoncé under emotional lock and key, not out of love but out of control. According to her, Beyoncé's silence isn't peace, it's survival. And that claim right there flipped the internet upside down. Because for years, the world saw Beyoncé as the picture of power, independent, untouchable, the queen of everything. But Jaguar Wright's version of events suggested the opposite, that behind the fame, the diamonds, and the flawless image, there was fear. That Beyoncé might be trapped inside the same gilded cage she helped build. The internet didn't know what to believe, but one thing was clear. Jaguar had cracked open a door that could never be closed again. And once that door was open, people started digging even deeper, right into the most uncomfortable chapter of all, how Jay and Beyoncé first met. By the time Jaguar Wright's claims started spreading like wildfire, fans were already in detective mode, combing through every old interview, every forgotten quote, every awkward moment from Jay and Beyoncé's early days. And that's when the internet stumbled on something jaw-dropping, a timeline that didn't add up. Because if Jay-Z's own words are to be believed, he might have met Beyoncé when she was still a teenager, not the grown woman fans always assumed. And that one tiny slip-up flipped everything. In a 2007 interview with Charlie Rose, Jay-Z was relaxed. Maybe too relaxed. The host asked a simple question. How long have you known Beyoncé? Jay smiled nervously and replied, however long she's been recording, I met her 10 years ago. The studio went quiet for a split second. Then came the math. 10 years before that interview would have been 1997 when Beyoncé was just 15 or 16 years old, and Jay-Z was already 28. And just like that, the internet did what it does best, it connected the dots. Fans immediately started comparing that timeline to Diddy's situation with Cassie. The same age gap dynamic, the same power imbalance, the same grooming allegations whispered for years. Jay's nervous laugh in that interview suddenly didn't seem so harmless. Comment sections filled up with comments like, wait, are we just realizing this now? And he said it himself on camera. People who once defended the couple's love story started rethinking everything they thought they knew. And that's when the rabbit hole got deeper. Rumors about Jay's past resurfaced old stories linking him to Foxy Brown, who was also underage when she entered the rap game. There were whispers of an inappropriate closeness, promises of fame, studio sessions that blurred the line between mentorship and manipulation. At the time, nobody dared question it. Jay was untouchable, and Foxy's voice was easy to silence. But now, with the Diddy and Cassie scandal reopening old wounds, those same whispers sound a lot more like patterns. And fans couldn't ignore the eerie similarities. Two music moguls, two massive empires, both tied to women much younger than them at the start of their careers. Both now surrounded by accusations of secrecy, control, and emotional manipulation, and both allegedly protected by the same system that rewards silence and punishes truth. Even the way Jay and Beyoncé presented their relationship, polished, PR perfect, Storybook felt like a carefully crafted illusion, hiding something much darker underneath. But what made fans' stomachs really turn was what came next. Because once people started piecing together the timeline, new accusations began to surface, including the claim that Jay allegedly introduced Beyoncé to substances early in her career, something her former bodyguard Uncle Ron publicly echoed. He described Jay as someone who used control and dependency to keep Beyoncé loyal, shaping her image from behind the scenes like a puppet master. Whether that's true or not, it added another chilling layer to the story, one that fans couldn't easily dismiss. And suddenly, the fairy tale power couple didn't look so perfect anymore. Every romantic lyric, every onstage performance, every glossy photo now looked different, more like performance than partnership. And while Beyoncé's fans tried to defend her legacy, others argued that her silence was exactly what kept the truth buried for so long. Because sometimes what's left unsaid tells the loudest story of all. And as that realization spread, one question echoed across the internet. Is Beyoncé still living in that silence today? The golden image was cracking. The love story the world idolized was showing its fractures. And for the first time, fans weren't just questioning Jay-Z's past. They were questioning what Beyoncé knew and how much of it she chose to ignore. And that's when the narrative took a chilling turn from love story to captivity. By this point, the fairy tale was unraveling fast. What once looked like a royal love story was starting to feel more like a psychological thriller. And the biggest twist came from the people who claimed to have seen it all up close. Because behind the diamonds, the Grammys, and the glamour, there were whispers of control, manipulation, and a kind of quiet fear that even Beyoncé's power couldn't hide. And it all started with one voice, her former bodyguard, Uncle Ron. Uncle Ron, who once worked directly for Beyoncé and Jay-Z, began speaking out on social media, and what he said sent shockwaves across the internet. He claimed that Jay-Z had conditioned Beyoncé using money, image, and emotional manipulation to keep her dependent. According to him, Jay knew exactly how to build her up and exactly how to break her down. He described her as someone living in a golden cage, surrounded by fame but trapped in silence. It wasn't the kind of accusation you could ignore, not when it came from someone who'd been in the room. And that's when fans started connecting his words to everything they'd already seen. Because when you look back, the signs were there all along. From the way Beyoncé disappeared between album cycles to how Jay always seemed to control the narrative when rumors hit. Even that infamous elevator fight with Solange suddenly looked different, less like family drama and more like a crack in the control system. People began to wonder if Solange wasn't just defending Beyoncé that night, but freeing her, even if just for a moment. And that realization changed everything. Jaguar Wright doubled down, saying Beyoncé's quiet perfection was a mask of survival tactic. She said Beyoncé learned early on that silence was safety, that her queen image was her armor. And once the world started worshiping that image, Jay-Z didn't just have a wife, he had a brand he could control. A brand that could be molded, marketed, and monetized, even at the cost of her peace. And that's when fans started to see the darker side of the empire. Because think about it, every move Beyoncé makes is carefully measured. Every performance, every photo, every interview, down to the last word. That's not just discipline, that's surveillance. Jay-Z's control wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, systematic, and wrapped in luxury. The private jets and mansions didn't represent freedom. They represented the walls of the life she couldn't escape. And when you realize that, even her silence starts to sound like a cry for help. Fans began revisiting her lyric songs like Haunted, Pretty Hurts, and Don't Hurt Yourself. What once sounded like art now sounded like confession. Beyoncé had been telling us for years, but the world was too busy calling her flawless to actually listen. And when you see it through that lens, the image of Beyoncé sitting stone-faced at award shows, avoiding eye contact, staying calm through chaos, it's haunting. Like someone who's learned that composure is the only kind of freedom she's allowed. And if that sounds tragic, just wait, because what happened next at the Grammys would make everything 10 times worse. After years of silence, Jay-Z finally stepped up to defend his wife on stage. But what he said and how he said it sent chills through everyone watching the night. The whole world saw the cracks in real time. The Grammys were supposed to be a victory lap, but instead, it looked like the beginning of the end. Jay-Z took the stage, calling out the Recording Academy for never giving Beyoncé her due. Yet, when it came time to praise her, he didn't even say her name. He called her "this young lady." The crowd cheered, but Beyoncé's face said everything cold, tight, unreadable. And the internet noticed instantly. Minutes later, they left early. No celebration, no smiles. It felt tense, awkward, almost rehearsed. Fans compared it to Diddy's shout-out to Cassie right before her lawsuit dropped, a forced show of love before the storm hit. And from that moment on, the fairy tale image was gone. After that night, Beyoncé went silent, but her actions spoke volumes. She launched her haircare brand, poured herself into solo projects, and started moving like a woman securing her own future. Insiders claimed she was separating finances, restructuring teams, and keeping distance from Jay's business ties to Diddy. She wasn't running, she was preparing. To the public, it looked like ambition. To those paying attention, it looked like exit strategy. And that's when Jason Lee's name reappeared right on schedule. Jason's old clips started resurfacing. His threats, his smirks, his receipts. Suddenly, they didn't sound crazy anymore. With Diddy under fire and Jay's past being re-examined, fans wondered if Jason had been hinting at this exact downfall all along. And that's what makes this story so dangerous. Because if Jason ever drops what he's holding, it could shatter more than a marriage. It could shake an entire industry. For now, Beyoncé stays silent, Jay stays strategic, and Jason, he's waiting. Because when the truth finally drops, nobody's crown will be safe. So, what do you think? Is Beyoncé finally breaking free, or is she too deep in Jay-Z's billion-dollar web to ever walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like, and subscribe, because when this story explodes, we'll be right here to break it all down first. In the kingdom of fame, even queens bleed in silence.